Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Owen Lee carefully parked his car, letting the last notes of his favorite song fill the silence before he turned off the engine and stepped out. He looked up at the building, where the neon sign glowed against the evening sky, sparking a sense of pride within him. As he walked inside, he nodded to the security guard in greeting and headed to his corner office on the top floor. Recently, his CFO had brought excellent news. The company's valuation had reached $30 million, and interest from investors and venture capitalists continued to grow. Despite tempting offers, Owen felt no urge to sell the company. His passion for his work, his team, and the company left him with no desire to part with it. Owen's life had settled into a peaceful and happy rhythm. His relationship with his wife, Riley, was warm, and together they enjoyed the fruits of the years they had poured into building the company from scratch. Life hadn't always been easy, but now they could afford the comforts they had once only dreamed of. Riley worked part-time as a marketing consultant from home, a flexible schedule she appreciated. Tall, with bright red hair and a fit figure, she exuded a natural beauty that endlessly captivated Owen. Their physical connection had always been strong, although Owen had noticed it waning over time, from several times a week to more sporadic moments of intimacy. He couldn't help but notice that Riley had been increasingly engrossed in her phone, messaging someone he couldn't identify. One day, when he wanted to check a sports score on her phone, he found it now had a password, a change that surprised him. They had discussed her decreased interest in intimacy, and Riley reassured him it was just fatigue and natural age-related weariness, reminding him of how deeply she loved him. They talked about starting a family, and although Riley wasn't overly enthusiastic, she agreed to stop taking birth control for 3 months. Owen felt hopeful, believing she shared his desire, although he sensed some hesitation in her mood. As he reflected on all this in his office, Owen noticed his close friend and VP of sales, Grayson Lewis, walking in looking unwell. Grayson was an old friend from college and a former high school teammate. Despite their professional roles, they had a close bond. "Hey, boss," Grayson greeted him with a weary smile. "I'm feeling awful. Seems like the flu. If you don't mind, I'll head home, rest up, and be back tomorrow." He added that he'd finished the proposal for the new climate control project. Owen nodded to him. "Take care, Grayson. Hope you feel better soon." Returning to his work, Owen realized that the latest version of an important file was saved on his home computer. Instead of going home immediately, he decided to ask Riley to send it. However, when he called the home phone, it went straight to voicemail. He tried her mobile, but it was off, which struck him as unusual for a weekday. With no other choice, he decided to drive home to retrieve the file himself, figuring he'd be there in 15 minutes. The road was quiet, and good music played on the radio under the warm sun, but as he turned onto his street, his pulse quickened at the sight of a familiar car parked outside his house. It was Grayson's car. Owen parked on the street and approached the house quietly. The ground floor was silent, with no usual signs of activity. Riley's office was empty, as was the kitchen. Then he heard voices and muffled sounds coming from the direction of the bedroom. A deep sense of dread washed over him as he began to grasp what might be happening. Moving silently, he took a knife from the kitchen counter and went upstairs. Stopping out of sight, he listened to the conversation between Riley and Grayson. He heard Riley's voice, laced with worry and tension. "Grayson, we can keep this up a bit longer, but Owen's starting to suspect something. I just can't be with him as often. It just feels wrong after being with you." She confessed that her affair with Grayson had been a way to satisfy desires she'd struggled with, and a final attempt at self-exploration before committing herself to family life with Owen. "Once we're done here and after the conference, it'll all be over," she said, making it clear that she intended to end their clandestine relationship. Owen suddenly had a flash of memory. 2 weeks ago, Riley had casually mentioned her plans to attend a marketing conference. Now he remembered that his close friend and colleague Grayson was also supposed to be at a sales conference in the same city that weekend. All the puzzle pieces fell into place, and an unpleasant realization overtook him. Determined, Owen reached for his phone, turned on the camera, and quietly approached their bedroom door. What he saw froze his blood. There, right in front of him, Riley was sitting with Grayson, her face radiant, fully immersed in the moment. A surge of anger overcame him. Without thinking, he stormed into the room, recording with one hand and holding a knife in the other. He grabbed Riley by the hair, pushing her away from Grayson and throwing her onto the bed. Her eyes widened in terror as she recognized him. "Owen, wait! This doesn't mean anything." When she tried to reach out to him, Owen's gaze grew harder and his grip on the knife tightened. "Both of you, sit on the bed, now, and stay silent if you don't want to find out what this knife can do," he commanded. They, trembling, obeyed, huddling together, wrapped in the bedsheet. Riley broke into sobs, and Grayson stammered in an attempt to explain. "Owen, please, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything, it's just a release," he muttered. Riley, through her tears, echoed him. "Owen, I love you. It doesn't mean anything. Just one last time before starting fresh. Please, it doesn't change my feelings for you." Owen's face twisted in disgust. "How can you say that?" he hissed. "You've shown me what our marriage means to you. You turned everything into a joke, humiliating me in my own home, with my own friend. And now you expect me to comfort you?" He took a step back, recoiling. "I can't even look at you." Riley's face contorted with pain, her body shaking. Owen's words cut her like a knife. He had always protected her, always placed her above all else. In the chilling silence, Owen took out his phone and dialed a number. "Hannah, it's Owen. You need to see this." He sent the video, his voice trembling. "Grayson cheated on you too. I thought you deserved to know. I'm sorry." Hanging up, he turned to Grayson, his gaze filled with contempt. "Tonight, your family won't be waiting for you at home. You betrayed not only me, you betrayed them as well. I'll give you one chance. Tell the truth. When did this start, and how many times have you lied to me?" Riley tried to intervene, desperately attempting to put an end to the agony. "Owen, please, it doesn't matter anymore. It's over." Owen's glare silenced her. She shrank back, pressing herself against the headboard, tears streaming down her face as Grayson began to speak. "Please, Owen," Grayson began, his voice barely audible. "I don't want to lose our friendship or my job. With Riley, it just happened. It doesn't mean anything. It happened only 5 times. The first time was at those conferences. We met for dinner, had some drinks, things got out of control. The next night was the same." His voice trembled as he confessed. "A month later, Riley called when you were away. She invited me to your home. We did it in your bed. She said it added excitement, a sense of risk. And a few weeks later, we met at a hotel." Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the last remnants of Owen's faith in his friend and wife. He stood there, listening to the confessions, feeling the last traces of trust slip away, leaving only bitterness and betrayal. "She called me recently and asked me to pretend to be sick so we could spend time together. She felt such a strong pull toward me that she wanted me nearby, lying next to her, fulfilling needs she didn't dare to voice. We agreed to meet one last time at the conference next month, our final 3 nights together to say goodbye. Both of us understood the weight of our actions, felt overwhelming guilt, and knew how wrong it all was, especially in regard to you, my family, and everyone involved. Riley knew that you were hoping to start a family soon. She even planned to stop taking birth control. We both agreed. It had to end here. We would go back to being the devoted partners we had sworn to be. Owen, it pains me deeply to apologize to you. Looking back, I realize just how misguided my actions were. I may have destroyed my marriage, your marriage, and possibly even my career, and it all depends on whether you can forgive us." Riley looked into Owen's eyes, her regret obvious, and admitted, "Yes, Owen. I succumbed to something new, something thrilling. It had nothing to do with any lack in you. I love you, truly. You're the only person I've ever loved. I want to live with you, to build a family, to grow old together. You treated me so well, made me feel needed. Yes, there was excitement with Grayson, but it doesn't compare to what I feel for you. Please don't let one terrible mistake destroy everything we have. I cherish these 16 years of our marriage." "It meant nothing," she insisted desperately. Owen's pain was almost palpable. "Nothing? Do you really believe that? Do you understand what this is doing to me? How could you think that being with another person would have no impact on our marriage? The lies, the betrayal. How am I supposed to just forget it? How can I ever feel the same knowing you could disregard our bond like this? This wasn't a simple mistake. It was a conscious choice, over and over." For the first time, Riley felt the full weight of her actions. She had convinced herself it was only physical, something harmless that wouldn't affect their relationship. But hearing Owen's words, she realized just how far she had drifted from him, without fully understanding it. Although she loved him, she had allowed that distance to grow. Perhaps it was the guilt she tried to ignore that had slowly eroded their relationship. She had never thought the affair would come to light. Owen's trust had been so strong, and she assumed it would remain unshaken. Foolishly, she had believed he would forgive her, that she could make him forget, with time, love, and maybe even children. But now she saw how naive she had been, how she had distorted reality to justify her actions. She had inflicted a deep wound on the one person with whom she truly wanted to build a life. Her heart sank. Had she destroyed everything? How could she even attempt to make things right? All she could do was look at Owen, her voice barely audible as she pleaded, "Owen, I am so sorry for everything I've put you through. I wasn't thinking. I never meant to disrespect you. Hurting you was the last thing I wanted." Owen's face was a mix of pain and anger as he raised his phone and replayed the video of her saying Grayson's name. "And you still say you didn't mean any disrespect? You knew exactly what you were doing," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. He turned to Grayson, his tone icy. "Your career here is over. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. You're fired. Now get out of my house." Grayson rose to leave, and as Riley moved to follow him, Owen's furious voice stopped her. "Stay right where you are," he commanded. She remained there, feeling the full extent of his pain, now mixed with seething anger. "What have I done?" she thought, realizing she had destroyed something beautiful with the one who had always looked at her with love. Grayson, hastily gathering his belongings, left the room and disappeared into the night. Owen's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Riley. Pain and betrayal were mixed in his gaze. Riley crawled out of bed trying to reach him, extending her hand in comfort, but he quickly backed away, brandishing a knife forward as though this gesture could keep her at a distance. In his eyes she saw her reflection, a traitor, a liar, someone who had shattered the sacred trust of their relationship. Overwhelmed with guilt, she ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and with trembling hands turned on the shower, collapsing onto the floor. All she could hope for was that a bit of distance would help Owen calm down and that he would be ready to talk once he had cooled off. Under the hot streams of water, her tears blended with the shower's flow. She wanted to believe this might somehow wash away her guilt. After what felt like an eternity, she dried herself off, put on a robe, and slightly opened the bathroom door, prepared for any outburst of anger from Owen. But instead, she was met with an ominous silence. She stepped into the hallway, feeling the emptiness press down on her like a heavy weight. Desperate to make things right, she decided to give Owen space and sleep in the guest room until he was ready to talk. But as she passed through the bedroom, she saw open drawers from which his belongings had disappeared and an almost empty closet. His 2 large suitcases were also gone. On the bed, a carving knife lay embedded deep into the mattress, a silent yet undeniable statement. Owen was gone. All she could do was hope he was safe and that he'd answer her calls in a day or two. Burdened with regret, she went to the guest room, curled up, and sobbed herself into a restless sleep. Meanwhile, Owen spent the night on the couch in his office's conference room, tossing and turning sleeplessly. He had instructed HR and security that Grayson was no longer permitted in the building. The next morning, Grayson arrived at work, assuming things might have cooled down a bit, but security quickly escorted him out, warning that any further attempts to enter would lead to a police call. Back at his desk, Owen sat alone, engulfed in the pain of losing his marriage. He once felt a profound connection with Riley, but now it felt as though that connection had vanished, leaving only empty pain. Whatever emotions he felt, anger, jealousy, sadness, none could erase the bitter truth. Riley was no longer his true partner. The dream of children once cherished now seemed impossible. Their life together was over. With resolve hardened by heartbreak, he called the CFO to discuss the company's future and the steps he'd taken. The CFO, shocked by the news about Riley and Grayson, strongly advised Owen to step back and give himself time to recover before making serious decisions. But Owen was unwavering. The next morning, Riley woke up feeling the full weight of her actions. Owen's face, hollow and wounded, flashed before her eyes, filling her with deep shame. "How could I have done this?" she thought, repulsed by herself. A meaningless fling with someone she barely cared for had jeopardized her marriage, a marriage to the only man she truly loved. She struggled to believe the damage she had done to herself. Determined to make things right, Riley vowed to do everything to win Owen back, to restore what they once shared. She picked up her phone and dialed his number, but the call immediately went to voicemail. Leaving a message, she whispered, "Owen, I'm so sorry. I love you. And I know I hurt you. I'm willing to do anything to fix this, to be the wife and mother you deserve. Please call me." Days passed in silence. On the third day, desperate to hear anything from him, she called his assistant, Brenda. Brenda, who respected Owen and knew the situation, called back with his message. He needed space and would reach out to her when he was ready. Riley clung to this small hope, convincing herself that this just meant he needed time. But her hope was fragile. Finally, Riley contacted Grayson to confirm what she had feared. Owen had already fired him. Rumors had reached her that Grayson's wife had kicked him out, leaving him no choice but to move back in with his parents. He seemed eager to meet with Riley and talk, hoping to discuss the possibility of Owen forgiving them. But she quickly shut him down, demanding he keep his distance and stating she wanted nothing to do with him. Though she placed most of the blame on him, she knew deep down that her own guilt was just as strong, if not stronger. She couldn't understand why she had risked everything she had with Owen, feeling the full weight of her actions' foolishness. After a week of waiting for any sign from him, Riley could no longer bear the silence. She tried calling Owen on his mobile, only to find his number was disconnected. When she called his office, she was told he was unavailable and advised not to call again. This only strengthened her determination to find him. Initially, Riley had planned to keep their affair a secret, assuming that Owen would want to avoid any scandal within the family and among friends. But now, desperate for any news, she began reaching out to Owen's friends, asking if they knew where he was or how he was doing. Each gave the same response. They knew nothing and had been instructed to stay out of his personal matters. The cold indifference of their replies made her suspect that Owen had told them about her betrayal, intensifying her shame. As a last resort, she reached out to Owen's parents, hoping he might be staying with them, but they hung up as soon as they recognized her voice. When she called back, her calls went straight to voicemail. Undeterred, Riley went to Owen's office and managed to persuade security to let her into the lobby. Soon, Brenda approached her with a stern expression and asked why she was there. Struggling to maintain her composure, Riley said, "I want to talk to my husband. He should at least respect me enough to hear me out." Brenda's response struck her deeply. Respect? The kind of respect you showed him and your marriage? "Maybe you should reflect on what you've done," Brenda added coldly. "In any case, Owen no longer works here. He sold the company, left, and made it clear that you're not to receive any information about him. Now please leave the premises, or I'll call security to escort you out." Stunned, Riley returned home, trying to process what she'd heard. Sold the company? Left? It seemed unbelievable. Why wouldn't he talk to her? She opened her email and, filled with guilt and remorse, wrote a long apology, sending it to both his personal and work addresses. But the email bounced back as undeliverable. In the following weeks, Riley exhausted every option, calling his parents, only to find her number blocked. She spent hours in the guest room alone, feeling the crushing silence of Owen's absence. A month passed without a word from him, plunging her into a fog of loneliness. When all else failed, she hired a private investigator, who soon provided a brief report. Owen had indeed sold the company, likely for more than $30 million. He had closed all their joint accounts, canceled their shared credit cards, and disconnected his phone, internet, and email. He sold off valuable items, left the city, and, surprisingly, paid off the mortgage on their house, fully transferring it to her. Despite the investigators' efforts, no one from Owen's circle shared additional details. 3 months after Owen's disappearance, a courier delivered an envelope to her home, signed in his handwriting. Heart-pounding, Riley opened it, hoping for some kind of clue. Out first came his wedding ring, followed by legal documents and a photograph cut into strips. Piecing it together, she recognized it as their wedding photo, intentionally sliced up. She burst into tears, but after the painful moment, gathered the strength to look at the remaining contents of the envelope. Inside, she found a letter and a flash drive. She began reading Owen's letter, her hands trembling. "Riley, I know you've been searching for me, hoping to talk, hoping I might forgive you. It seems you believe this was just a mistake, that we could move past it, that you could break our vows, betray my trust, and somehow we'd go back to what we had. I was stunned that you could deceive yourself so thoroughly, thinking we could ever restore even a fraction of what we once had. Now I realize that you never truly loved me, not the way I loved you, if you could betray me so easily, as if it meant nothing to you. You didn't even seem to grasp the unbearable pain you caused me. No one has ever hurt me so deeply, and the fact that it was done by the person I held above all else makes forgiveness impossible. Our trust is shattered, and even the thought of being close to you again, of holding you, feels inconceivable. Perhaps you've already erased those memories, or maybe they never meant anything to you. If that's the case, I've attached a video, a recording of you and Grayson, the moment that destroyed our marriage. The words you spoke in that video haunt me. Each time I watch it, they tear me apart all over again. Friends and family blamed me for leaving and didn't understand my silence, so it's clear you never confessed to what you did. In response, I showed them the video and wrote a letter, revealing the truth about the affair so they would understand why there's nothing left to fix. I was torn to pieces, and in that suffering, I sought some form of revenge. I'm not proud of it, but I saw no other way. From today on, you will never hear from me again. You won't see me. I won't return to our home, our town, or possibly even our state. I may never fully understand why you did what you did, what drove you to take this step. I hope you find the answer before you enter into any serious relationships, and that my pain serves as a reminder not to repeat those actions. Someday, I hope to leave behind this torment, shame, and humiliation. I want to look back on the early days of our love without bitterness. Maybe, over time, my hatred will turn into indifference, or perhaps I'll find forgiveness or understanding within myself. But even if that day comes, you will never know. Maybe none of this matters to you, but I'll never know for sure, and that uncertainty will stay with me. Goodbye. Inside the envelope were the final documents titled Dissolution of Marriage. But at that moment, through her tears, Riley could barely make out the words before she sank to the floor. 7 years had passed since Owen disappeared, as he promised in his letter. Riley hadn't received a single piece of news about his life, health, whereabouts, or even his well-being. Owen showed more than generosity in the divorce, leaving her the house instead of any further financial support. Her lawyer said it was the best offer she could expect, as the $30 million Owen made from selling his company were on foreign accounts, beyond any legal claims. Not that Riley cared. She felt she deserved nothing and accepted what Owen deemed fair without objection. At first, life was unbearably hard. Friends and family had seen the video of her and Grayson, caught in her own marital bed. She began to understand the full weight of the pain she had caused Owen, and realized that he showed the video to dispel any lingering questions for those close to them about the future. The shame and humiliation of her loved ones seeing it wounded her deeply, but she knew it couldn't compare to the pain she had inflicted on him. Overcome with guilt, she took her parents' advice and sought a therapist, hoping to cope with the grief and depression and to start rebuilding her life. She went on a few dates, but each one felt shallow and awkward. Her defenses were too high for anyone to break through. Nothing went beyond these strained interactions, and on the rare nights when she sought solace in physical closeness, it only reminded her of how low she had fallen. What once might have brought comfort now felt hollow and degrading. When Owen left, he took all the photo albums, leaving her with no physical reminders of their life together, no photos, no material mementos. And with each passing year, the image of his face, his voice, his warmth, his gentle touch, all of it slowly faded into the background of her life. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The motorcyclist eases the clutch, flicks off the engine, and glides silently down the road for a couple hundred yards before his bike finally coasts to a halt. With a fluid motion, he lowers the kickstand and dismounts, glancing toward a car parked discreetly further along the street. A quiet cue signaling his arrival, right on schedule. He scans the quiet neighborhood. Only a few houses show any signs of life, their windows faintly lit. The rest of the street is swallowed by darkness. Moving cautiously, he slips through the side gate, avoiding a direct approach to the front door. Instead, he edges around the side of the house, feeling for the piece of wood he'd stashed there earlier. Concealed in shadows, he waits. Barely 5 minutes pass before he hears water coursing through the pipes inside. Someone's taking a shower. Moments later, the front door creaks open, though the porch light remains mercifully off. Keeping low, he inches forward as a man steps out, closing the door softly behind him. The assailant strikes suddenly, a calculated blow aimed at the man's knees. Surprisingly, the man barely makes a sound, no scream or shout of pain, just a muffled groan as he stumbles forward, trying to steady himself. Taking advantage, the assailant swings again, this time hitting the man square in the face, dropping him to the ground, unconscious. Working swiftly and methodically, he proceeds to break each limb and joint. Arms, legs, hands, knees, elbows. The only response is a faint gasp as joints pop, and the man remains unconscious, spared from further pain. The attack is over in less than 2 minutes, and the assailant heads back to his bike. An ambulance siren pierces through my thoughts as I hear it drawing closer, speeding toward my neighborhood until it overtakes me, lights flashing as it heads directly to my street. My heart pounds as I arrive, taking in the scene of my home illuminated by blue police lights. 3 patrol cars are parked outside, and the ambulance pulls up just as I do. Officers are scattered across my lawn. I park quickly and dash toward the house, shouting, "What's happening here?" One of the officers steps forward, attempting to hold me back. I dodge around him, frantically calling out, "Layla! Layla, where are you? What's going on? Who's that lying on my doorstep?" Another officer intercepts me as I demand, "Where is my wife? Why is no one telling me what's going on?" "Please identify yourself, sir," one of the officers says, trying to remain calm as if my worry for my wife doesn't matter. The question feels absurd. This is my home. My wife is Layla. How can they not understand that? "I live here," I shout. "Tell me, where is my wife?" "Sir, control yourself," he insists, his voice steady. "There's no need for aggression." "No need!" I yell. "I come home to this chaos and no one will tell me where Layla is or why there's a half-dead man at my door." "The lady of the house is inside, sir, giving a statement," he finally says. "She's okay?" I press, desperate for confirmation. "Yes, sir," he replies, finally answering me directly. I murmur a thank you and slip past him as paramedics load the injured man onto a stretcher. Inside, I find Layla in the living room, along with 2 plainclothes officers and a very watchful PC Bright. "Layla, what happened?" I ask, trying to contain my panic. "Who is that man outside?" Tears begin to well up in her eyes. One of the officers glances at me, saying firmly, "Mr. King, we need you to remain calm." Calm. I confront them, my tone simmering with irritation. Mind telling me what's going on here? After a brutal day, I walk into chaos at home, and no one seems willing to explain. The two officers in plain clothes exchange wary looks until the one who asked me to stay calm finally responds. At 11:49, we received a report of an assault happening at this address, he says. We sent out a patrol, but by the time they arrived, the assailant was already gone. They found the victim, checked him over, and called in medical support. So, where were you around 11:50? He asks me directly. I shoot back, probably somewhere on the A1, near the A605 junction. My words come out sharp. And what exactly makes you think I'm involved? Why would I be? A pause hangs in the air as I look over at my wife. Were you involved with him? I ask, the bitterness roughening my voice. She lets out a broken sob, covering her face with her hands. The realization sets in hard. So it's true then? I shout, unable to keep the anger from spilling out. She doesn't respond, just cries into her hands. Disgusted, I turn back to the officer with a dry laugh. If you catch the guy who did this, tell him I owe him a beer. Now, if we're done here, I'd like to take a shower. Hold on, sir. We still need to verify your involvement. We'll need to check you for blood or any other evidence. I glare at him, then start taking off my boots. I throw them aside, peeling off my sweatshirt, t-shirt, and jeans until I'm left in just my socks and underwear, staring him down. Is this enough? I ask, defiant. He lets out a weary sigh. Sir, you can put your clothes back on. Oh, so you can haul me in, strip me again, and shove me into one of those paper suits? No thanks. I turn toward the door. I'm taking a shower. Sir, please. He starts, but I ignore him, walking to the sideboard where I pour a generous glass of whiskey. I raise it in his direction, then down it in one gulp. I pour another, locking eyes with him as he turns to his partner, both of them looking uncomfortable. Sir, we need you to stop drinking. We still need to question you formally. Oh, you need this, you need that, I scoff. Well, I needed a peaceful night, not a house full of cops and paramedics. I needed a loyal wife, not one who cheats. And I sure didn't need to find her lover on my doorstep. Right now I need a drink, a shower, and for you to leave. Another choked sob escapes my wife, and I can't help glancing at her. She stands there, tears streaking down her cheeks, arms hanging limp, eyes pleading for something, comfort, forgiveness. It's too late for that. I down the whiskey, then turn to head upstairs. I make it only a few steps before a woman in a yellow forensic suit stops me, insisting on a check for any evidence of a fight. I grudgingly comply, and as expected, she finds nothing. She collects my clothes as evidence, then finally allows me to clean up. She declines my dry offer to help her scrub my back. Betrayal lingers in the air like a sour odor as I walk into the bedroom. The mix of sweat and stale whiskey turns my stomach. With a twist of anger, I strip the stained mattress off the bed, drag it downstairs, and haul it out onto the lawn for everyone to see. Back in the bedroom, I fling the window open wide and without a second thought, start hurling her clothes and possessions out. Each item, a piece of a past I'm shedding. Mr. King! Mr. King! Someone calls, interrupting my purge momentarily, but I toss another handful of belongings into the air. Mr. King. I turn toward the voice. Mr. King, the officer says, you need to come with me to make a formal statement. Why? I ask, pretending to be puzzled. You know exactly why. My statement's already on file, I respond with a hint of a smirk. Unless you're arresting me, I'm not stepping foot in that station. Try it, and you'll be the one explaining wrongful arrest. Unlike most of your clients, I've done nothing illegal. I let my words linger. They're all I need. I can back this up, and I suspect he knows it too. I catch his face reddening, a deep flush rising from his collar to his temples, like a cartoon character on the verge of a meltdown. Donald Duck? Maybe Daffy. Or even better, Yosemite Sam, if he only had that wild red mustache and a cowboy hat. Finally, he reins in his temper and speaks. Mr. King, you're giving me no choice. I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of assaulting Mr. David Pratt. You have the right to remain silent, but remember, anything you don't disclose during questioning that you later bring up in court may harm your defense. Anything you do say could be used as evidence. He adds, if you don't have a lawyer or can't afford one, we'll appoint one for you. I grin, pulling on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Let's get on with it then. As he leads me toward the door, I catch a last glimpse of the chaos in the living room and can't resist a final jab. Satisfied now? I call out. Gather your things and go. Head to your mother's place or whatever dive you crawled out of. Outside, 2 officers wait, escorting me to the back of a patrol car. As we pull away, one glances back. You gave that guy quite a beating. Can't say I'd blame you. I'd do the same if it were my wife. Jaw tight, I mutter, had I known sooner I'd have gone further. Is he going to make it? I ask, equal parts spiteful and curious. No idea. After a pause, I add, by the way, that detective, is he always a jerk? I hear faint, restrained laughs, but neither answers. Before long, I'm checked in and left alone in a cold interview room. I rest my head on my arms, attempting to grab some sleep, but each time I start to drift off, someone barges in, snapping me back to reality. Eventually, Detective Doofus himself appears, settling in across from me. He offers me a solicitor, recites my rights, and reminds me that this conversation is being recorded. He begins rattling off our names, the time, 4:57, and the charges against me, aggravated assault, grievous bodily harm, and maybe even attempted murder. He again urges me to get a lawyer. I refuse, and he finally dives into questioning. So where were you during the alleged attack on Mr. Pratt? I reply deliberately, ensuring every word registers. As I told you yesterday, I was driving back from Newcastle. I didn't stop once and followed an ambulance down Huntington Road. It overtook me just before I reached home. When I got there, a cluster of officers was already swarming the place, including you. Or should I call it a crowd? A pack? Whatever the term, there were plenty of you, and some bloodied moron was sprawled out on my doorstep. That's when I learned my wife had been having an affair with him. I continue. Since then, you've confiscated my clothes, refused to let me clean up after a long day, despite the smell of proof of her betrayal making me sick. And I haven't slept. I've been awake for over 25 hours. I pause, letting it hang there. I already told you all of this when I arrived home last night. As his anger reignites, I realize I'd overlooked the early signs, the faint red in his ears during my first push. He tightens his jaw, forcing out each word. Do you have anything to back this up? If you could, you'd have spoken up already. Why didn't you ask sooner? He presses, his gaze intense, holding me in silence for what feels like an eternity before breaking it with, what evidence do you have? And, is he still intact? Excuse me? I respond, keeping my tone flat. It's a straightforward question. Does he still have his private parts? Yes or no? He shoots back, his voice edged with impatience. I cock an eyebrow, pushing back. What, too challenging a question? Let's simplify. If I discovered I was married to a cheater and caught her with another guy, trust me, he wouldn't stay whole for long. So, if he's in one piece, it wasn't me. His face darkens as I say this, but he pulls himself together. Mr. King, are you even taking this seriously? A mocking chuckle escapes me. Maybe you're not as slow as you look, I reply, pretending to be impressed. He cuts to the point. Can you prove you weren't there? I shrug. Not here, no. But if we go to my van, I've got proof of my whereabouts at 7:30. And just how does that help? He snaps, his frustration barely contained. I offer another nonchalant shrug, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a full response. His stare sharpens, like he's trying to bend me to his will through sheer intensity, which amuses me enough that I let a small laugh slip. He growls, "What's this supposed proof?" Maybe a signed, time-stamped delivery slip from Newcastle around 7:30. That good enough for you? I manage a mostly straight face, watching him silently count on his fingers, figuring the 252-mile distance. His ears are blazing red by now. He finally looks pleased, almost smug. About 200 miles, mostly on dual carriageways and motorways. With some speed, you could make it, Doesn't mean you have an alibi. Perfect timing then, wouldn't you say? I reply with a smirk, which only aggravates him further. He growls, halts the interview, orders me to stay, and storms out. 5 minutes later, he's back, looking as if he's just bitten into something sour. You knew I'd miscalculated, didn't you? I only grin, envisioning him as a dramatic detective in some cheesy western, pistols raised, declaring himself the toughest investigator in all East England. All he's missing is a droopy mustache. Holding back laughter, I picture his geographic and mathematical prowess immortalized in their records. He storms out once more, and I decide to rest my head a moment. Sleep eludes me, though. Quiet chuckles keep breaking free. Eventually he returns, more subdued, announcing I'm free to go. Of course, there's the usual paperwork. I have to be de-arrested and sign a mountain of forms before they'll let me leave. Relief washes over me when I find her still at home upon my return. I'd left my keys last night, and it spares me the choice of breaking a window or setting up camp on the lawn. She looks as drained as I am when she opens the door, her apologies spilling out, how it was all a mistake, how it won't happen again. I keep my calm, even as she insists it was only a one-time thing. I have to keep up the innocent act. With what I know now, she can't suspect a thing. If I'd caught on earlier, there's no telling what kind of trouble I might have found myself in. Ignoring her hollow reassurances, I make my way upstairs for the shower I'd promised myself the night before. As the warm water streams over me, I begin mentally structuring my day. First priority, contacting a lawyer. Do they operate on weekends? I'll look it up once I get through a couple of other things. After drying off, I head to the bedroom to grab some fresh clothes. Everything in the room remains untouched, just as I'd left it. Glancing out the window, I allow myself a small, satisfied smirk. Her clothes still lay scattered across our garden and onto neighboring lawns. The urgency of finding a lawyer suddenly slips a couple of slots down on my list. As I descend the stairs, she calls out, mentioning she's made coffee for me. Though I'm reluctant to accept, I realize I could actually use it. In the living room, I find her waiting, eyes red-rimmed and puffy from tears. "Who is he?" I ask, my voice steady. She stammers, "No one. No one you'd know." I say nothing, simply holding her gaze. Under the weight of silence, her defenses crumble. "Don Stebbins," she admits at last. Now armed with the name, I pick up the phone and dial the hospital where he works. After a few formal exchanges, I'm connected to his ward. I ask about his condition, but as expected, they refuse to disclose anything due to confidentiality. So I pivot, asking if he has any family there with him. My lips curl into a smile as the nurse mentions his wife is with him and offers to get her on the line. I hear the nurse step away, then return before a woman's voice comes on. "Hello? This is Julie Anderson. Who's calling?" "Hello, Julie," I begin. "My name is Cole, Sebastian King. You don't know me, nor does your husband, but I thought you might like to know where I live." A pause. "Why would I need your address?" "Well," I reply, "I thought you might want to meet my wife, Layla King. Maybe it would be easier to talk things over here, somewhere private. You know, give you the chance to discuss the usual matters, recipes, home care, or maybe even the fine details of why your husband is such a remarkable lover that my wife thinks he's worth our marriage." Layla stares at me, horror etched on her face. At last, she screams, "No!" I half expect Julie Anderson to hang up, but instead she stays on and requests my address. I give it to her, along with my mobile number, and she says she'll come over immediately. "I'll have the kettle ready," I say, almost cheerfully. While waiting, I briefly consider laying out a plastic sheet on the living room floor, but after checking the fridge, I abandon the thought. She arrives sooner than expected, her car tires screeching as she pulls up in the driveway. I hope she noticed the speed cameras on her way. I swing open the door just as she reaches it, which seems timely. I suspect she would have forced her way in otherwise. She strides in with determination, her eyes locking onto my wife. "Is it true?" she demands. "Listen, it's not what—" Layla starts, but Julie cuts her off, her voice like a slap. "Don't you dare lie to me, you faithless liar!" she yells. "You have to understand," Layla sobs. We didn't plan for any of this to happen. I lean back and observe, quietly entertained, as the scene plays out before me. Us? By we? You're really just talking about yourself, aren't you? Julie's voice, though soft, held a razor-sharp edge that cut through the room's silence. And you just watched it all unfold? Layla hesitated, her words catching in her throat. You could have stopped it. You could have reminded him, I'm married, or maybe even told him, you're married too. But neither of you held back. You both decided to walk straight into betrayal. Julie's voice dropped, simmering with restrained anger. Well, congratulations to both of you, she sneered. You'll be there by his side when he's discharged, won't you? She let out a laugh, cold and hollow. They tell me he'll need constant care, feeding, dressing, bathing, the works. Your husband sure gave him a lesson or two. And I should say, she flashed me a sickly, sweet smile, I owe him a thank you. Her tone turned lethal. As I told that so-called detective last night, if it had been me, he wouldn't be recovering anything. I'd wait till he could stand on his own, then make sure he understood how deeply he crossed me. Tea or coffee? Coffee, please, Layla replied with a shaky smile. Leaving Layla alone, Julie and I retreated to the kitchen, bound by shared pain. We talked about our shattered trust, broken promises, and faithless partners. We exchanged stories of love turned sour, bonds tarnished by deceit. Now and then, Layla would appear in the doorway, listening briefly before retreating again, her discomfort palpable. When the words finally ran dry, I walked Julie to the door, bidding her farewell. A surprising sense of clarity settled over me as I watched her leave. Without delay, I headed back inside, grabbed the mattress, and hauled it out to the garden. On top, I stacked Layla's clothes and belongings, each item heavy with memories. Retrieving a green gasoline canister from the shed, I soaked the pile. Layla rushed out, her face white with fear. Got a lighter? I asked, deadpan. Then, with a small smirk, I added, just not the red one you hang in the window when I'm not around. No, please don't burn my things, she pleaded, her voice shaking with desperation. Doug, I'll do anything. There's one last thing to finish, I muttered, and then maybe I'll see what's still left standing. Doug, please, she begged. I'm sorry, I love you. Love? I replied, barely looking at her. Is that what you'd call it? Like I wouldn't notice? Or did you just not care? Doug, please. No, I snapped. You thought I didn't matter, did you? Well, take what's yours or watch it burn with the rest of this trash. I headed back inside, already thinking of my next steps. I'd call a lawyer, though with it being the weekend, I'd have to wait until Monday. When I returned outside, Layla had gathered most of her things and left. Taking a deep breath, I lit the mattress, watching as it caught and consumed whatever remained of her life here. 14 months later, I finally received my decree absolute, sealing my freedom. Layla's twins, now 6 months old, were proof enough of her infidelity. I had no obligations to her or them, and that suited me just fine. Pastor Donald Anderson, as I heard, was still begging his wife to take him back, mostly it seemed, so she'd help care for him in his fragile state. Detective Brian Hill had called me in a few more times regarding the incident, but he was no closer to solving it. I gave him nothing but polite indifference, leaving him with an unsolved mystery and the open ends of a shattered story. There were a few things I chose not to share with him. I didn't bring up the fact that my buddy Stu had dropped by a couple of weeks back. I didn't say anything about how she'd opened the door in a silky nightgown and dismissed him coldly. Nor did I mention that Stu, leaning against his bike with a cigarette in hand, had called another friend, only to witness the pastor arrive and get a warm greeting from Layla at the door. I also omitted that Stu had swung by to pick me up in Newcastle on his roaring motorcycle, a Hayabusa, if that kind of detail interests you, or that we had swapped bikes so I could get back just as the pastor was finishing his time with my wife. I made sure not to mention how I had subtly yet unmistakably made my stance on the situation known, or that I had driven off to a planned location, changed out of the coveralls I wore for the ride, and all the rest of it. I left out the part where I met Stu again at a rest stop a few miles down a deserted country lane to exchange bikes one final time before finally heading back home. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.